Hey everyone, welcome back to Elevate Your AIQ, your go-to source for insightful conversations on human-centric AI readiness, talent transformation, responsible innovation, and the future of work. My distinguished guest today is Meg Bear. She's a globally recognized technology executive, innovator, and operator. She's the former president of SAP SuccessFactors, a board advisor at NovaWorks and Papaya Global, and co-host of the Meg and Amy Show on the Work Defined podcast network, of which this show is a proud member as well. Meg and I cover a lot of ground in our conversation, from the intellectual humility that separates sustainable leadership from the, quote, founder mode hype, to the power of recognizing human potential in the AI era, to the challenges of total workforce visibility and what a future of fluid, individualized work could actually look like. Meg is one of the sharpest, most thoughtful voices in the talent and HR technology space. This conversation did not disappoint. Stick around for a great one, and thank you, as always, for listening to the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to Elevate Your AIQ. I am your host, Bob Pulver, and with me today, I have a special guest, the legendary Meg Bear. How are you today, Meg?
I am so good. I'm delighted to finally get a chance to talk with you on air.
Likewise. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I have been trying to keep up with all the places where you've got your fingers and toes and everything going on in the talent space and the AI space. And you've got your own podcast. We're sort of cousins on the Work Defined podcast network with
Best
your
network
partner in
there.
crime, Amy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great. So before we get into quite a few topics that I want to cover with you, just thought folks would like to hear about your distinguished career and your background and some of the
Sure.
current projects that you're working on.
Yeah. So I am an innovator and an operator. I have mostly been in the technology business and primarily in the people technology business for a good portion of that. Most recently in the operator function, I was president of SAP SuccessFactors. So bringing technology to global businesses around the world. And when I stepped out of that role, I decided to do a few more kind of independent side quests, if you will. I, since then, have convinced my best friend, Amy Wilson, to create a podcast with me called The Meg and Amy Show that you just mentioned. I have been doing a lot of research, some advisory, some board work, and I've been sort of giving myself permission to think about where the future is going to be. And I have this belief that this is a moment of opportunity, and I have anchored that belief into my mission, which is to invent the future. And my thinking around inventing the future is a future that creates better opportunities for humans and a future that embraces the real unlock that comes from technology, but does it in a way with a ton of curiosity to imagine a world that is different than today and to just lean into that all the way.
Well, that's fantastic because it aligns so well with, the themes of this show and some of the things that I'm aspiring to do. So definitely inspirational, all the work that you're doing. And at some point in this conversation, I do want to ask you about one of your new board
Oh,
advisory
yeah.
assignments with our mutual friend Kelly, who I'm hoping to have on the show
Oh, you
sometime soon.
should. Yes.
But yeah, she's great and she's done some amazing things in the space as well. And we have high expectations for her and Melanie and the NovaWorks team. So we will definitely get into that. But one of the things that was caught my attention that you've been, I think, writing about, I think it was in your and Amy's latest newsletter, talk about this founder mode versus growth mode and how organizations really need to think about the types of environment and culture that they're setting as they're scaling up a startup or as they're thinking about, a certain transformation and the sort of the attitude that key leaders need to have to foster the kind of climate for growth. And so just thought we could unpack that for
Yeah.
starters.
Yeah, there's a there's a tremendous amount there. So m- most of you guys may remember that this whole like founder mode versus manager mode conversation, I attribute it to to Brian Chesney and the conversations that were probably like a year and a half, 2 years ago, where they began this kind of energy around we need to get out of manager mode, the belief that professional managers are incrementalists and maybe don't understand first principles, and instead get into founder mode where you have leadership's responsibility to go deep in the business, to go deep with the customers, and to find innovation to move that forward. That's a dramatic summarization of that. And Amy had a beautiful retort to that where she described our thinking as grower mode, which is not to throw out the need for innovation and for thinking from first principles, but to make sure not to underestimate the importance of true leadership characteristics that include sort of galvanizing humans to do big things and building cultures so that people are part of it. And so this is where we were about maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. And we've kind of come around again in this SaaS apocalypse, AI doomsday kind of thing, where you then have Jack Dorsey coming in and going with an extreme founder mode approach, or Brian Hallan is calling it Dorsey mode, which is get rid of all the middle management, get back to sort of small teams, build a technology layer that does the majority of your thinking for you, and really give up on managers, but only invest in directly responsible individuals, people that manage projects, and people that are coaches, player coaches that, sort of focus on growth. And this really struck a chord with me, probably even more than Amy, in that I feel that there is, just like any of these sort of big provocative things, there is a element of something really important inside there. And this was, in my opinion, wrapped in a ton of hubris, where the kind of a natural extension was, well, Jack's belief that eventually everybody just reports to him because between him and the AI context layer, everybody will just be doing really great work. And, there isn't kind of no need for other brains in the conversation. And so while I agree that AI can create amazing insights and it can create amazing thought partners, the whole, a country of geniuses available to you to help you make decisions, that's all great. But to me, it is missing some really important elements of what it means to run successful businesses. And if I were to distill what I think is missing into, sort of a single concept, it would be intellectual humility. I believe that what is missing in this idea is not that we shouldn't rethink how technology plays a part. And it's not even that we shouldn't rethink how organizations are built and operating models work. But the belief that a single person is going to make everything happen, to me, is the wrong kind of culture to build a sustainable future. To me, where innovation really happens in amazing ways is when you have a deep set of expertise. So that's where I do believe in the sort of founder mode thing. A deep understanding of your customer and a really good foundation of first principles, and the capture and collection of collective intelligence brought forward with a ton of intellectual humility so that we can learn from each other and that we can maximize our collective strengths. And so that's the part I think is missing, and that's where it, strikes a chord with me.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there. And so that was pretty impressive. I didn't know you were going to string a couple of those topics together like that. So let me try to, crash in on a couple of key points there. First of all, I love the phrase intellectual humility. And I think the connection to collective intelligence in terms of cognitive diversity is apt. And I spent a lot of time at IBM on that exact topic and understanding that, we don't have each of us individually don't have all the answers. We can't possibly have all the answers. Even the smartest person won't necessarily be thinking tangentially about all the ways the dots can be connected and where opportunities maybe exist or where risk may exist. And so in general, that, Steve Jobs is an exception because normally, you don't have the cliched, startup garage kind of scenario. You have teams that come together and in aggregate, they innovate. And so I think being able to recognize that you don't have all the answers is one of the keys to success, because you're gathering, information on what would otherwise be, blind spots in your thinking and your approach. And I'm not saying everyone has to solve everything, every challenge that exists all at once, but just recognizing that you can't possibly do it all, I think is important. So you've got to sort of deputize people, and that's part of being a leader instead of a manager, is making sure that others are aligned to that vision that you've created and can help execute against it. Otherwise, that vision is, in most cases, kind of a pipe dream.
Well, and it's very lonely, right? Like if your entire path to success is expecting you to know everything. First off, we all know that's impossible. And especially now, it's, quite literally impossible. Nobody knows what the future is going to bring. But why set yourself up for that, emotional drain on what is already a really complex and hard moment to be alive? Why wouldn't you harness the energy that comes collectively with problem solving? It's just really hard for me to understand why anybody would see that as a better route, because it's just, setting yourself up for a lot of emotional burden that is probably more than any one person could really handle well.
Yeah, for sure. One of the other things that came to mind just as you're talking about how people need to sort of think about, how they contribute to organizations and leaning into the human centricity kind of piece of that, which can go in many different directions. But one of them, when I think about the durable sort of human skills and attributes that people bring to an organization, no matter how much technology is thrown at it, no matter how much autonomy you've added through, agentic workflows and things like that, there are still very important, really vital ways that people are still going to be needed and form what I guess generally describe as the sort of connective tissue that actually makes decisions. We both know humans are still supposed to be making decisions, especially when it comes to talent and people's lives and livelihoods. And then all the ways, not even just the formerly soft skills like empathy and curiosity and things like that, but just all the exception processing, all the ways in which we bring context and prior experience to decisions. I just gave a presentation last week to, a tenured community of workers, mostly knowledge workers, but I was really trying to emphasize that take everything that you know and everything that you're capable of, and then also add some of these AI, capabilities, your AI fluency, readiness, et cetera, because then you've really got this, you're really sort of standing out in terms of, top talent, having the desirable and future ready skills. And a phrase that you used in one of your posts really caught my attention in that regard, which is find new pathways of excellence. I thought that was really, really well stated in terms of how people can find potentially their new path, whether that's through upskilling or reskilling, career pivots, whatever you need to do. Don't discount your ability to succeed going forward, but you've got to maintain your agency. You've got to maintain your self-confidence. that even if it's not where you currently are employed, your skills, your expertise, your experience, and all of those human, attributes are very much needed.
Yeah, one of the things that I spent a lot of time on in past cycles was really the observation of sort of two things. Most of us do not spend enough time appreciating our strengths. There's a lot of reasons for this, but I would distill it to if it's a strength for you, it comes pretty easily. It's probably hard for you to break it down for someone else because it's becomes a sort of an intuitive, natural thing. And you tend to underappreciate how differentiated it is. And that can be a challenge for a lot of different reasons. But the other side of it is, one of the big responsibilities of leadership from my point of view is actually recognizing potential, being able to see the strengths in others and to help them not only recognize what they're good at, but think creatively about where they might best be applied. And for me, this has always been something that I did naturally. Again, I didn't realize this was an unusual thing and an actual strength. I just thought this is what anybody would do. You have a certain set of people you're working with. You want to do big things. You kind of figure out who you can trust to do which kinds of things. And then if you're me, you go around selling people on why this is their idea and why they want to take it on. And I realized that the early stage of my career was built almost entirely on this set of strengths, is just figuring out what people were passionate about, what they were good at, what they did better than anyone else, and then just figure out how I could apply that to the problem to hand. The thing about leaning on these sort of what we're starting to think about as context layers. And again, I want us to be really clear. I'm not against context layers. I just want us to be a little bit aware of what a context layer will and will not provide for you. And I'm pushing back really hard that people are believing that a technology layer is going to do all of your human optimization. So I tend to talk about that as, the context layer becoming Dunning-Kruger as a service, because you get people that are overconfident about what it's going to tell them, and they're going to just try to turn that into activation. What that misses is what we really need in this moment, which is helping to recognize potential, because none of us has the full battery of skills in the AI era. It's impossible to have because, everything is changing so quickly and nothing is in its final state. Everybody kind of can feel that. And the more you're involved, the more it's really clear to you. No one has any idea what they're doing. The most experienced people with AI will tell you that. And so if we think that we're just going to sort of magically let technology figure everything out without recognizing that we ourselves don't totally understand how to apply ourselves, and organizations don't know how to best optimize. So what I'm trying to encourage us all to do is to invest more for ourselves and for teams that we're responsible for. Invest more in sort of the two things that I described was kind of an early pattern for my own success. Get more clear about what the strengths are for yourself and for the people that are working with you. Not what they do and not their past achievements, but their actual strengths they've leaned on to be successful. And then start to recognize that as potential to be applied to a new set of tasks and opportunities. And I really think that is where we should be spending our time for ourselves and for our teams, because the more we spend our time there, the more we're going to activate that curiosity possibilities mindset, the more we're going to open up our own learning agility. And the more we're going to let go of the anxiety and fear, because once we have this sort of curious approach, we can take some risks and try some things out and not hold ourselves to expertise that isn't available to us anyway. And so I think it's really, this is why I say it's something that we have to also build within ourselves, in this resilience, in this awareness that our value is not our past jobs. It is not our career titles. It's none of those things. Our value is inherent to us because we are human. Our strengths are given to us either because we were born with them, or because we started developing them early based on things that interested us or whatever. And we have all of the raw materials to thrive in this future state. But it's not going to work if we only want to bring our knowing selves. We have to bring our learning selves to this problem.
I think that's why we've both been harping on, the fact that people need to be hiring for skills and potential, and not based on, why are you even bothering with the resume at this point? And so, without going too off on a tangent on that subject, I guess I wonder how effective you think AI can be in helping us with that discovery process, either from the organizational side, L&D's perhaps expanded role to be monitoring to see how your skills are developing in context, in different scenarios, in different interactions and relationships and things like that, as much as that is sort of documented and interrogated, I suppose, within privacy constraints, of course, but versus a person trying to figure that out themselves, right? Because one of my thoughts has been, people are, you alluded to this just before, people are not aware of their own potential because they haven't flexed certain muscles, or they haven't been given certain, assignments. Maybe they've been sort of typecast because they're good at a certain set of activities, or handling a certain type of customer, or, whatever it is. And they've never actually been exposed to certain things that actually that may be this serendipitous discovery for them. Like, not only am I good at this, but I think I would really like doing this.
Yeah. I think the thing that the way that I like to look at this is,
the pace of change in the world of business is fast, and that drives incredible complexity for the world of human resources.
Welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast, a series of conversations with experts inside and outside the world of HR on how to innovate, measure, and evolve our practices.
Our goal is to help provide you with practical examples of how HR has to change to meet the complexity of the business environment.
Every week, we'll talk to new and different voices on all aspects of HR.
And at times, we'll get irreverent.
Silly even.
And sometimes geek out on the data and technology that underlie the processes that drive the world of HR.
But the conversations are always insightful and fun. So please, enjoy the HR Data Labs podcast.
There's a real neuroscience element to this. We tend to talk a lot about psychological safety and the importance of that. And I do agree. And there's a little bit of a narrative going on in the tech world that winning teams, don't need psychological safety. They all should be scared, and they should just be, browbeaten into working really hard and, figuring it out as they go and all of that. And okay, sure. There are certain types of things where a coaching strategy of pushing you really hard can be beneficial. And sometimes you really do have to just be pushed off the edge of the diving board to realize what you're capable of. And so, sure, I guess I can leave some space for that. But in my experience, what works for most people is that somebody has a belief in them that they are capable. And I think it starts from that. It doesn't go the other way around. I really do think you have to be the one to have the trust and the insight first on behalf of someone when you're trying to get them to do something really different, or, maybe with higher risk. And I think it's twofold. I think, when someone else believes in you, it gives you a perspective that you can't have on your own. And so I think that's one reason that this is such an important time in how we direct and support talent. But I also think the other side of it is it gives you more backstop for what is the obvious risk, which is you're probably going to fail, at least at some path, right? And what I'm learning right now with even my own AI journeys and watching, so many others is that the need to rework a lot of these AI solutions is pretty high. Like that their lifespan is not very long right now because there's a new innovation or a new foundation model or a new something that creates obsolescence in the solution. And so even if you're successful, the time span of your success is probably only long enough for you to do like a half a victory lap, and then you got to get back in to discovery mode. The second thing that's really important in believing in someone is really the backstop for that failure, because the failure will happen, the failure condition will happen. And so you need to know that you have the support of the people around you and the leadership so that when these solutions become obsolete, when these learnings are no longer applicable, instead of that being a failure, that is an opportunity on the path to optimizing towards the future. Because again, what we're seeing is the second round is magical, right? The first round is messy and, maybe not even successful. But the second round, the rebuild, the redo, that cycle is faster and it's so much better. So culturally, emotionally, individually, this idea of a very important kind of psychological safety is what we need to be building right now for ourselves and for our teams. The kind that recognizes that the journey is improving us as we go and helping us to become the kind of leaders and the kind of workers that have not only a specific kind of skill, but reproducible kind of skill that is able to adapt as the innovations change. And that's what we need. We need those adaptive skills more than we need the very specific ones. So when we ask about, can AI help us in evaluating skill, it can, but we just need to recognize what skills we're actually trying to evaluate for. It's not just a specific hard skill. It is a human skill of self-improvement.
One of the things I was going to ask you is you were at SAP when you had, I forget if this was an SAP term, but you had this sort of evolution from human capital management to human experience management, right? And you were one of the first vendors to have an opportunity marketplace, so an internal talent marketplace where people could explore other opportunities across the organization. I like to assume that the organization was supportive of that and that it had some reasonable success where, managers weren't hoarding talent, but they looked at what is in the best interest of the company, of the person that we're trying to develop. So were you having these types of conversations, back then, and this is just the latest iteration? Because it's really doesn't have anything to do with AI. I mean, indirectly, it can relate to AI, but I mean, we could have been having this conversation, 5 years ago before generative AI, certainly.
Oh, absolutely. So a couple things. SAP already had an interesting infrastructure for these talent marketplaces. They called them fellowships, and I think they really evolved out of the cultural norms within Germany for things like apprenticeships. And so there really was already an affordance in the organization culture, back to your point about managers letting people try to go off and do these different types of fellowships. So that was probably one of the germinating ideas that helped us into this concept of opportunity talent marketplaces and the concept of dynamic teams, and against our overall belief for the vision of human experience management as the next evolution of human capital management. I I completely agree with you. What I've come to observe is that most of these ideas, both my leadership beliefs and the way that I have talked about them, have been pretty consistent actually for decades. Of course, the application of them and the urgency for them has shifted very dramatically. And I think that the overall sort of awareness of how these interact has evolved to kind of catch up with where I had been thinking even from the beginning. But as I look at what the future holds, I just can't help but believe we're just not going fast enough. We're still sort of held back with a very incremental mindset, a very sort of Deming kind of let's just improve along the edges kind of mindset, as opposed to a Clayton Christensen disruption kind of a mindset. And I just believe that we've hit the tipping point for which doing nothing is disastrous. Not moving now towards the future is disastrous. And the reality that I'm staring down is the fact that boards, investors, stakeholders are coming in with a significant amount of energy to reduce workers. And it is on us to turn that into something that makes sense, because left to its devices, it will become, sort of upside down in the representation of what people are doing. So people are thinking they're protecting their jobs by saying, hey, this stuff isn't going to really happen, and we'll only just automate this little task over here or this little task over here and save a little money, and that'll be sufficient. They think that's protecting something, but in my mind, I think that's actually putting a bigger risk on their work. And so I'm now of the belief that yes, jobs will go away. Yes, entire, definitions of jobs will be disrupted. Roles will collapse. Organizations will want to do more with less people. Teams will get smaller. All of those things are going to happen. And so my new point of view is, if you're not disrupting your own job and figuring out how you apply and make sense in the future, then you should not be surprised when your job goes away. Like, the only way to save your status as a worker is to make your own job obsolete and show that you're thinking about how to do a job that's relevant in the future. And so this is scary, but it's also I think it's unkind to not point this out to people, because now is when you can have a really impactful change by jumping in and putting your cognitive energy to figuring out how to optimize the entire business and the entire workflow, not just a few things that are in your job description. That's just not a winning math right now.
I was talking to Paul Rubenstein recently, and we were talking about, being a driver instead of a passenger. Or I think he was, I forget what the other analogy was. I think it was like captain or co-captain or first mate or whatever it is. But you've got to be in the driver's seat. And so, at a minimum, just be proactive about how you see your job evolving. If you can't handle the evolution of your job, and you haven't figured out, where to pivot to, then you've got to do some soul searching about, what, going back to your earlier point around what your strengths truly are and where your passions lie, and where can you continue to contribute and add value to an organization, or, do something on your own. I mean, it's not easy, I can tell you firsthand, but sometimes it's, at the end of the day, the better, positioning for you and your life and your lifestyle and your family, what have you. But you've got to recognize this. You can't stick your head in the sand and say, well, I'm just not going to believe the hype. You've got to look past the hype. Just like you've got to, if you're interacting with AI, you've got to have the critical, thinking and discernment to know whether it's completely bullshitting you or not. And so that's a skill in itself that people need to, continue
And I
to
would
learn.
just remind us all, like, the beauty of where we are now is everybody's learning. So you don't have to do this on your own. You, you can lean on friends, you can lean on podcasts, you can lean on coworkers, you can lean on, collaborate with another part of your organization. The beauty of where we are right now is there's a tremendous amount of learning going on. And unlike, I think this is the most pro-social learning environment I've ever seen in this kind of collective ideation. There are so many people eager to share tips, ideas, things they've done, productivity hacks, like all of these things. Like, this is a moment where everybody's learning together and so eager to share what they're learned. And you can see very clearly that some of it is really messy, and it's okay. So there's never been a better time to be a learner, because it's almost like, when you started college or whatever, everybody's lost, but you're all lost in a cohort. Like we're in a global cohort right now.
I am in a member of far too many communities, but I will say the theme that's consistent across all of them is they are not self-promotional. They are there to help each other. And when the official facilitator or instructor is not available, the people who are a little bit ahead are, reaching out and saying, let me know how I can help. You are absolutely not, in this alone, and everyone's technically at a different, starting point, which is why I get into this, AIQ kind of concept. Everyone has their own, and then your team may have an AIQ and your organization may have an AIQ, but I always focus it on the human-centric aspects. Like, forget about your infrastructure. And yes, obviously the maturity and the quality of your data is vital from an organizational standpoint. And you've got to have the capacity to have, to invest here, but you've got to recognize that some of your AI investment needs to go to the people who are going to help you, innovate responsibly. They're going to help you, find those new, areas of growth, help you cut costs, and help you redesign the very processes that they are involved with on the front lines. And so I just think people need to just keep their head up and look around, and you will find, change agents and people that want to make sure that everyone is moving forward and making progress.
Yeah, I really think maybe outside of COVID, right? Because when we all got stuck at home, everybody had to figure out mostly the same thing. So there was a lot of knowledge sharing there. But the only other time I've seen something similar was, if I rewind the tape back to when I was at PeopleSoft and we were acquired by Oracle, it was another moment where there was a large group of people trying to figure out, okay, I can't get into this system. I don't understand how this works, et cetera. And so again, it's almost like we're all starting a new job at the same time. So that should give a lot of backstop to the fear, to say that you're not alone in any of this. And I think the window does close, because once people start learning, they start accelerating really quickly in this AI era. And so you want to be able to catch on back when everybody is at the beginning, because otherwise they're going to be so far away from you, it's going to be very hard to catch up.
Yeah. I see some similarities. Well, it was too long ago for me to remember what it was like to, learning how to use a computer originally, but I do see some similarities with the advent of social media, especially in B2B, because there was I was part of this group at IBM trying to basically do reverse mentoring for executives. How do I use these different tools? What's appropriate? And how do I interact with these things? And how do I interact with my audience and what have you? So there's some similarities there, but nothing on this scale. I do think one of the advantages with AI is the tools that you're interacting with are also the help manual and the coach, right? If you don't know how to use Claude, just ask Claude.
Right. Yeah. And You can ask that dumb question and not be embarrassed because you're just asking Claude, right?
Right. As I was thinking about one of your earlier comments about like Jack Dorsey, some of these like myopic, decisions about, cutting people. It's hard to get my head around doing that. People have seemed like most of the companies that have gone too far, too fast into, automation and agentic and things like that have sort of come back to regret it. And so, Jack, you would think would know better that there would be backlash, or maybe he just thought he could power through it and what have you with his founder mindset. But I still think that is those companies are in the minority. And, if you're at an organization like that, then just make sure you're keeping your options open. But I guess when I think about some of the conversations I've had with some senior folks who are on boards, I do get concerned that the first question is, how many heads AI is coming, how many heads can we cut? I mean, you with your board seats, are you fielding those?
Am I asking those awful questions?
No, I know you're not asking, but are your fellow board members asking similar questions? Because I think the premise itself is misguided.
Yes. So I do think we're starting to evolve a little bit from the, everybody needs to save X dollars or, cut X heads to make things meet. I think we're also it's important to remember that we're also in a really complex macro environment right now. So most industries, between interest rates rising, and we've been kind of seeing this happen for a bit, you've got inflation, you've got energy, you've got a massive shift of capital to AI things, and that capital is coming out of something, you have new pressure on certain industries that is coming maybe from tariffs, maybe from, so just this has been a really complex moment for this conversation from sitting in boards. And, boards' responsibilities are things like risk and compliance and all of that. And so, the risk of keeping up with the competition when there is a general sort of squeeze and, pressure on EBITDA, that the reduced heads is a kind of an easy way to make the math work. So if you're looking to solve math exclusively, then that can be, the path you end up on naturally. I think where it's starting to get more nuanced in 2026 is, of course, you're getting a mixed set of readiness within organizations to.
Hey, it's Libby DeLucian. If you're sick of business advice that sounds cute, but doesn't actually move the needle forward, this one's for you. The Libby DeLucian podcast is where we go one layer deep. No gurus, no glitter, just straight up unfiltered talk about scaling a business, running a household, and holding on to your sanity in the middle of the chaos. If you're the bottleneck in your business or in your own life, I'll show you how to fix it. Simple, tactical, and one layer deep every time. Let's go. Visit libbyd.com and check out our podcast today.
To mobilize with AI, and you're also getting a little more clarity on cost structure. And so now you're seeing organizations try to rebalance that a little bit with expectations. What I think is a much more sort of important set of conversations to be having around the board table is really, a board's job is to help define strategy for the business. Strategy is a long-term thinking thing, and long-term thinking in this kind of environment is very difficult, which means it's even more important. Understanding possible vectors and how you would recognize when you maybe need to shift your strategy, and understanding how your landscape is changing, is the competition shifting. we've had a period for quite a bit of time, almost like 40 years, where most things were held constant. And then you maybe had just little adjustments year in and year out to your market. But these last few years, like we've had less things we can hold constant. And so we are starting to see a pretty big gap between businesses like that are AI first or AI native versus businesses that are, what we would think of as incumbents. Is certainly in my industry, which is technology businesses, we're kind of at the front end of that. But it's true everywhere. And so, initially you get improvements and that creates competitive differentiator. But very quickly, everybody has to do those things. And then all of a sudden it's table stakes. And that's the real concern I have, is not just the sort of ready, fire, aim of cut people and, add some AI and stir. What I'm really concerned about is that if you're not thinking of it as a true strategy conversation, you're in a race to the bottom of, where the bar is moving. Businesses have to get more efficient. They have to, because that is possible. And if it's possible, you must do it if you're going to be competitive, because we work in a sort of capitalistic society. And so figuring out how to make this a strategic benefit and a different way of capturing value is the real math that makes every other thing better. And so this is the part where I think great boards don't just stop on how do we get excellent EBITDA and high value for spend in our capital allocation, but the question is, where are the value capture opportunities that are in front of us if we look at the problem and the opportunities more holistically? And so this is the expertise needed to be able to have these conversations, and the risk of them is significantly higher than it's ever been. So the job of a board is harder, the job of the C-suite is harder. The job, it is a real challenge across the board. So I have obviously both as a board member and understanding this, I have a lot of empathy for everybody in this storyline, because it just reinforces that nobody has an option to do what they did before. Like we all have to up our game, and whether we want to or not, the bar is moving. But I think that the real opportunity is to ask yourself, how do we marshal the collective intelligence of our customers and our market and the landscape that we operate in to unlock new value capture in this world?
Yeah, and I think bringing together all of that data across your ecosystem I think it's going to reveal all kinds of insights and allow you to be much more agile and dynamic in terms of how you make some of these decisions. Because I feel like, I understand on some level that you need to, people are considered an operating expense, and in order to make AI investments, that money is not going to just come out of thin air, and so you're placing this bet that that you're letting go of the right people, if you do have to let people go, as opposed to sort of retraining them and doing a proper assessment of your workforce planning and how that all works. And so maybe it's just a matter of they don't necessarily have the people analytics and the strategic workforce planning maturity to be able to make all of those decisions, but they've got to make the investment somehow. So sometimes I think maybe they are in sort of this catch-22, but I also think that you need the brain power and that collective intelligence of your people to even figure out how to make the right, cuts to cost, how to find the right, growth areas and new business models and, target new markets and things like that. And so, yeah, AI can be augmenting, that that collective intelligence. But, I'm not saying any of this is easy. It's frustrating knowing all the things that we've been talking about in terms of human potential, and that people really want to, contribute value, and they want to contribute their expertise. They want to mentor others. They want to, collaborate, and they want to do all these things. And then they just get the rug pulled out from under them and just kind of left disoriented.
Yeah, and I think we're underestimating the real capacity bleed that we do when we don't have clarity of what we're driving towards, and we don't have clarity of what we're actually doing. So the problem with the ready, fire, aim approach of cut first and hope everything works out is not just the fact that you probably let really great people go and all of that, but it's also that the people that are still there, maybe you picked exactly the right people. Maybe you had like excellent insight into who was most equipped for the future versus the past, all of that. But even in that, you've given a body blow to all of the people that are still working for you without helping to marshal them towards the future. And so that, that the weight of that becomes material in and of itself, right? Because who is productive and does their best work when you're bummed out or worse, right? Like you're putting an additional burden on your own ability to be successful. And so again, I think we absolutely have to recognize that as leaders, our job is to manage energy. And it is our job to not only identify potential in our teams, help set the cultural foundations for learning agility, but also help individuals be able to see progress in their work towards things that really matter for the business, so that you can not only be building confidence and, psychological safety and essentially good vibes across the organization, but so that people feel clearly that their skills are developing as part of their job. One thing any team I managed, but especially when I was managing through big changes where we had to learn how to do something we didn't know how to do to achieve the thing we had to achieve, which is, to me, like always been the place that I would move my teams, because that's where growth happens. That's where interesting things happen. But, one of the things that I always made clear is that the value in developing these skills to achieve this thing we don't know how to do that is so important and so big is not just the value in the achievement. It's the value in who we become as part of that process. And the skill development that each person has the opportunity to do in service of this big goal is beneficial to them individually. And to me, like, that should be the commitment that each of us as leaders, whether you're a talent leader or a manager or just an individual who is looked up to from other parts of the organization, our job is to role model and to help our teams understand that their skill development matters to us, and not just because of what they can get done for us, but because what it will mean for their ability to, no matter what happens, have skills that are valuable in the market. So this is something that we all need to really internalize, that helping our teams get really good at this, both the learning agility and the understanding of the tooling and the understanding of first principles and how to build for the future and to reimagine what work matters. Look, all of those skills are things that go with you to your next role, your next opportunity, or when you venture out and do things for yourself. Like these are the things that you bring with you. And so we really need to tell ourselves the story of agency in this entire chaotic picture, because without it, we're just giving ourselves more emotional weight that doesn't have a good place to go.
I absolutely agree. I was reading the press release for NovaWorks, in addition to your announcement as an advisor, and I was intrigued by the approach in terms of the visibility that people will gain to, I guess, what I would consider the total talent landscape, right? So I spent just in my time at Talent Tech Labs and elsewhere just thinking about not just total talent intelligence, what it takes to actually pull all of that together from a bunch of disparate systems. Not to mention that a lot of companies, as you know, don't have contract labor even connected to HR. It's connected to fulfillment and supply chain and things like that, as if those people were cogs and other things, not carbon based. And so I think that alone is a huge, step forward to pull together all available talent, regardless of, contract type, relationship type, is really important. So you really understand how to move the pieces around and do proper strategic workforce planning, not just for your, full-time employees, but with that sort of preamble, I was just curious to get your perspective on, what attracted you to this promising startup and just, how that sort of fits into your philosophy.
Yeah. So a couple things. First off, obviously a huge fan of Kelly, a huge fan of Melanie, the rest of the team I've recently met, and just really delighted. For me personally, this is my first time to be a founding independent board member. So to get to be there from like day zero is such a privilege. And I work with a lot of early stage startups. I've worked with founders at various stage of inception, but there's just something really special about the sort of building of the backbone of what is the business. From the vision point of view, you could actually look at both of my board seats, my Papaya and my NovaWorks, are really aligned with my belief that work in the future, it does not look like it does today, right? And so work has more flexibility of modalities. So your point, like people will be working part-time, full-time, contractor, they will be working on projects and then off again. So there's going to be just a lot more fluidity in the structure and the makeup of work, that you can see that very clearly. And then you have the overlay of work will also be happening by agents as well. And so if you think about that and you recognize that the sort of legacy infrastructure is so separate today, and the rebuild of those foundation models is quite complex. And so it really does create an opportunity for new entrants to look at the problem from the foundational building blocks and the architecture. The other thing that I think is really special in the way that NovaWorks is looking at this is also, sort of the ability to be much more individualized in the world of AI for workers and their needs. Again, dramatically different than it ever was in the past, because you're not going to be building for personas. You're going to be able to be building for individuals. And so the idea that each individual can have an individual coach, an individual agent that understands their entire context and can help them with whatever the kind of things that they need help with, from the HR function, from the talent function. Like this is something that is very, like, you can see the future being very exciting and fulfilling a lot of promise that we've always yearned for, but maybe didn't have, sort of the right kind of cost structure to do that at scale effectively. And so I think this is such a special time for me. So to be able to think about, what are the foundational systems of work? That's NovaWorks. What are the payroll and benefits and payment side of that with Papaya? Like, what does it mean to really support that fluidity of work in a global way without it becoming like each thing is another, layer on a layer on a layer, which is how it works today. If you try to hire employees in different countries. That's a level of complexity. If you want to think about contractors, another level of complexity. What about, sort of inflation rates and currencies and how you pay and all of these different things, that last mile of payment, like all of this. There's a lot of innovation underneath that creates rails to do some really powerful things. So it's fun to be part of this kind of innovation. And as I'm sure you can imagine, for me, it's as much the people as anything else. And so to be in the rooms with cool people solving interesting problems is what I'm all about. So I feel really blessed.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing, some of the first innovations and solutions that come out of there. And I know, they've kind of got a head start with the ServiceNow platform to build upon, right?
Absolutely.
Which is huge.
And the customer base and the sort of clarity of how ServiceNow can solve parts of that story as well. So yeah, so it's a velocity maximizer across a few dimensions. So really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and Kelly went through that when she integrated her own
That's right.
previous startup, right? So she knew what it was like to replatform on the ServiceNow infrastructure. And so, yeah, I'm sure that some key learnings there. The other thing about having that all together, I've had a few conversations with people in the sort of extended workforce space. And one of the things that I called out on the sort of responsible AI front, as well as the talent acquisition side, is you really weren't you had all these people working for an organization, but they weren't all going through the same steps and the same, control mechanisms. And so you might, if you hired somebody through one of these contractor, platforms, a freelance marketplace or anything like that, a VMS, they weren't necessarily put through the same, paces from an audit standpoint, or they could be contract to hire, and they completely bypassed all of the solutions around talent assessment, compliance, everything. So I think that helps, sort of on the sort of risk mitigation side as well, just by default and, the nature of how it's all, brought
Also,
together.
just the planning and budgeting, right? Like understanding the holistic spend for what it is you're doing. I think we oftentimes think, well, okay, we have less full-time employees and that's going to change the cost structure. But if you don't understand the full picture of what you're spending for the agents, for the contractors, for the full-time and part-time employees, et cetera, like you just aren't making a real decision based on the full picture. And I just don't think, like, that might have been okay if your business was, operating on steady as you go. But I think in this world where we're going to have so much changing, having line of sight to that big picture is really going to matter.
Yeah, for sure. The podcast, you're in season 2 now, with the Meg
Season
and Amy
2,
Show, right?
yeah.
Yeah. How's it going?
It's just been so joyful for me. I would say I knew I was going to like it. I've been blogging for decades. I've kind of been, always doing a lot of external talking about things with customers, with partners, et cetera. I think the thing that I didn't fully appreciate was just how joyful it was going to be for two things. One, being able to own the content path, like what conversations do we need to have so that we can get smarter? And then, of course, doing stuff with Amy Wilson. Anytime you can do something with your best friend, I strongly recommend it. Anytime you can do something with someone that has skills you don't, I strongly recommend it. And while, we can make each other crazy like all good best friends can, it's just like so joyful to me. So it is wonderful to have the opportunity to do a podcast is just, yeah, it's great.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about is your own sort of AI journey. You've been sharing some of your experiences,
Yeah,
for better or
complaining
worse.
about Claude timing out on me.
Yeah, that. So I don't know if that was like a recent thing, but this week Claude has been ridiculous in terms of its token
Yeah.
usage. Like I'm like, I see it compacting the conversation to continue. I'm like, what are you talking about? We've been talking for 20 minutes. Like, how could I be at 90% capacity.
Yes. I had been leaning primarily on ChatGPT. I dabble in everything, but like I'd mostly done most of my investment in ChatGPT up until recently when I migrated over to Claude. And so yes, I there's a marked difference with how tokens get burned through in Claude versus ChatGPT. But what I'm enjoying, so part of it is a learning curve, like how to optimize and all of that. And the reason for shifting over wasn't really like a big dramatic thing. It was just more like I really wanted to start building agents. I wanted to play with co-work. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to take the time and invest and migrate over. And unlike most people who do like a lot of pre-work planning, I do a little bit, but mostly I just like jump in and like kind of figure it out. I don't read the manual first, kind of, in general. I'm just like, oh, I'll give it a try. And then if it doesn't make sense, I'll stop and read some instructions. And so some of it, was a little bit learning curve, I would say. But where I am now, I'm really starting to break through in, the return on investment of the foundational stuff that you've done. So I'm not fully over that hurdle, but I can feel it. So this last week, I just decided to build a new set of agents. So everybody talks about, I get a thing to send me an email and it'll tell me all this, read all my emails and tell me all the things. And like, that just never spoke to me as a use case. It never spoke to me as a use case when I actually had a chief of staff, and it doesn't speak to me as an agent as a chief of staff. It's just like, I learn by reading, and I read really fast. And so I just didn't want to I didn't want somebody else doing that, because then I have to read their summary, but then I know myself, I'll still go read all the things. And so it's like that just seemed like a waste. But what I do realize is that I'm just so wildly goal oriented. I have like long-term BHAG goals. I've got quarterly goals. I've got fitness goals. I got a goal, and I track all the things, I love tracking progress on goals. It's just like a full-on hack for me. And so I just started deciding, all right, I want to build more like a motivational goal alignment kind of a thing. And so I'm still playing around with it, but I got it to send me a text message every morning. And what it does is it takes my 10-year goals, it takes my word of the year, it takes all of my progress tracking, it looks at my calendar. And then what it does is, instead of telling me, oh, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, it tells me the things that I'm doing, how they ladder up to my long-term goals. And then I asked it to give me a stretch goal at the end for something maybe I could add if I was feeling it. And so it gives me 5 different things of, that these are things you're doing and here's why they're important, And so I joke, I basically build a full-on ass-kissing automation. I acknowledge it, but if these systems are going to kiss my ass, I feel like I should tell it exactly how to do that properly to make me do the things that I want myself to do. So yeah, so that's my latest little thing. And now I'm building goal trackers and scorecards and all these other sort of things, because once you start, it can do all those other things as just little add-ons. And so yeah, now I'm probably going to get really obnoxious about it.
No, that's great that you've leaned in and you've found what works for you. I mean, kind of all over the place. I do most of my stuff in Claude, but I have Google Workspace, so I should be using Gemini as well. But yeah, I've used it I use it for the podcast. I use it for some advisory work. And yeah, I mean, trying to build my second brain system, which I've made some progress on, but still a ways to go. And is that the same as what you and Amy were talking about, with Nate's
Yes, it is.
open brain?
And I'm pretty far along with that, but to get it finished, I'm just going to have to burn a ton of tokens. So I'm just going to decide a weekend where I've got the overages, because it's really synchronizing all the data in because I have just too much. That is just burning a ton of tokens. So I've sort of set it aside to finish these other things, and then I'm going to come back to it in one fell swoop. But then the other thing I just did is I just realized that the whole Claude design, you can build your design palette. Well, I already have one for my website because Madison made me a beautiful one. And so now I'm going to try to see if I can't get it to take that design system and use it for building out my goal tracker, my open brain vision, user experience, et cetera, so that it'll like, make me happy when I look at it versus annoyed.
Yeah. I was just getting comfortable in Canva and Gamma, and now I gotta check
Exactly. That's my point
Claude
about like
design.
none of this is the final state. It's the journey of learning. So might as well pick something that is interesting enough to you that you're going to enjoy the outcome of it, but maybe you're not so invested in it that it matters that much.
Well, I think for both of us, there's things that we, whether it's presentations or website design and other sort of content creation, activities. I mean, it is nice to have one sort of ecosystem where all of that is available. I think OpenAI may have just released
They did.
a design
I'll be
tool as
over
well.
trying some of that as well so I can maximize tokens properly.
Trying not to be, have too much shiny object syndrome and go in all of these different places. I really do want to build competency in some of these. I've been plowing through code where I didn't think I would be comfortable. And you have a little bit more of a technical, background than I do. But yeah, I'm powering through. I'm getting API keys and connecting a bunch of stuff.
Right?
So
Yeah.
it's working. I mean, someone may come in with an architectural, vision and be like, what is this? And maybe then I'll fix it. But for now, getting some things done, and sometimes it's frustrating, but sometimes I get a great sense of accomplishment, and I realize, this actually saved me a couple hours a week. Each of these things add up.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I always put it in the realm of the process is as much about learning as it is about the thing that I build. So then I feel good about it. For anybody just getting started, if you're followers of Lenny's podcast, like a couple months back, he had a segment on something about like how to build product sense. And basically it was a tutorial that you used Cursor for and had you like walk through all of the pieces. And I found that really helpful to getting oriented to, where everything lives and what it all does and all of that sort of stuff, and understanding slightly complicated things like context rod and stuff like that, so you can kind of get a sense of how these things think. I found that really helpful before I just jumped into Claude Code and Cowork and all of that. So, if you're feeling intimidated, I would recommend that because it's very patiently walks you through it, and you do the whole thing inside Cursor. So you're sort of you're building something while simultaneously learning how to engage with an AI to build something. So it's very smartly done. It's not like you're just reading a separate instructions. The instructions are embedded in the Cursor product. So
Okay. All right. Well, you've given me a few more ideas, things to check. And please keep sharing your experiences. I definitely appreciate the humor, especially the airplane sniffing glue one the other day.
So funny. I said that to Amy on the podcast and she just looked at me like I was the dumbest. Like, what are you talking about? And I was like, okay,
Oh my God. It's hysterical. I gotta rewatch that movie. I gotta make my daughter watch that movie.
Most of the time they don't hold up, but that's the only thing I will warn you in watching it with your kids. You'll watch it and you'll be like, this doesn't really hold up the same. So, but
yeah, you're probably right. Well, I know I'll enjoy it rewatching
Exactly.
it. It's been a while, especially the unedited version. Meg, thank you so much for spending so much quality time with me. This has been fantastic, and I think there's a lot of takeaways for my audience. So really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. This has been joyful. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for listening. We will see you next time.